Hjertelig velkommen til et nytt program her på Israelkanalen. Denne gangen så er vi i Haifa, nærmere bestemt på Rambam-hospitalet. Og Rambam-hospitalet det er et teknologisk senter for medisin her i Israel og i hele verden. Med meg her så har jeg Debbie Hemstreet. Welcome to the program, Debbie.
Thank you for having me.
How long have you been working for the Rambam Hospital?
Since 2011.
And what is your mission here at Rambam?
Okay, officially I'm an English editor and writer, but I have several hats. One of those is I'm the editorial assistant for Rambam Maimonides Medical Journal. I help with our marketing communications in English, and I'm also responsible for representing the hospital to the Christian audience as Christian Friends of Rambam.
So what is the importance of having Christian Friends of a hospital?
Well, I think it comes down to that we're in an Israeli country, and most people view Jewish people as the natural audience to support an Israeli hospital. However, Christians are very much understanding the importance of Israel in the Bible. They're very grateful for what God has done through the Jewish people in bringing Jesus the Messiah through the Jewish people. And so many Christians are interested in finding a way to support and encourage Israel. And since our hospital plays a major role in the safety and security of the people of our region, since it's involved with saving lives, I believe that it makes our hospital an ideal project for Christians to support, where they can know that their money is going to go somewhere, and they know where it's going to go, how it's going to be used, and that they are having a positive impact and effect on Israel and the people who live in Israel.
Yes, I understand. So you say money, because this hospital is funded not only by the state of Israel, but also a lot of donations.
Many, many, many donations. The model for supporting a government hospital in Israel is very different from many other countries. The government supports a certain number of hospital beds, and they are the ones that say, this is how many beds you can have, and for each patient we will reimburse you X amount of money. Then you have health care funds, and when a patient is admitted, they get a certain amount of money from the government and a certain amount of money from the health care fund to cover those needs. The government is responsible for giving a certain budget to the hospital, and the government decides, we think this is how much money you need to run the hospital. If you think it's not enough, then you raise the money for it. So if we think we need a piece of new equipment, we have to get permission from them if it's outside of the budget. They can look at that and they can say, no, we think what you have is good enough, and not give the budgeting. And in that case, then we have to turn to donors and say, we really need this equipment, will you help us? And the same thing goes for facilities, for renovations, and a lot of other things.
So for all the donations that you get outside from the government, that you can spend freely within your work here then?
Well, theoretically, it depends on the donor, because the donors will specify how they want that money used.
Yeah, I see.
One donor might say, for general purposes, then we can put it for whatever the hospital's most urgent need is. Someone else wants to give for pediatrics, another for cancer, another for heart, and then we have to use that money as the donor has specified.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any numbers of how much donations you get from abroad?
Oh, I know that it's in the millions, but I don't know how many. A million offhand, that's not a number I came prepared with.
Okay, I'm more looking for maybe the percentage of the funding that is donated.
Okay, I think from that perspective, when we look at some recent development that's happened on the campus, we're looking at around, I would say 75% of what's been done on the new campus. That would be the Children's Hospital, the Cardiovascular Heart Hospital, which is under construction, the Joseph Fishman Oncology Center, and the Sammy Ofer Fortified Underground Emergency Hospital. I would say those facilities, at least 75%. We have another building that I didn't have a chance to tell you about. That's the Helmsley Health Discovery Tower, which will have a tremendous impact on our region for medical research and discovery, as well as medical care. And that also is being primarily donor funded.
Mm-hmm. I understand that the Rambam-hospital has a special place in Israel. It's the main hospital up in the north?
Yes, we are the main referral hospital for all of northern Israel, and we are the only level 1 trauma center for the region. So we receive any soldiers who are wounded in a war or any type of an incident in the north or up on the borders, they come to Rambam. Anybody who's a trauma patient, for example, if they're going on a hike in the north of Israel and they fall off a cliff and they've broken their neck, they're going to be flown by helicopter directly here, not to another hospital. So we handle all of those trauma patients. We are also the dedicated healthcare provider for United Nations forces located up in this region.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that is very special about this hospital is the hospital that we don't see on the surface.
Yes.
The one that is underground. Is there anything like that in the world?
This is the largest facility of its kind in the world. There's something similar that inspired what we did in Singapore. And some of our engineers heard about it many years ago, and they went to Singapore to look. It was a very small hospital, but very, very small, and it was a one-purpose facility, and it was underground. So taking the information they learned from that, they came back here and they were realizing we need to do something. They were beginning to make plans, and then the 2006 Lebanon War happened. Now, when that occurred, we didn't have any facility other than an unfortified basement. Patients had to be transferred underground to the basement or sent home, and patients and staff were all at risk. Missiles were landing around the hospital. I believe it was over 60 missiles landed within a half a kilometer radius of the hospital, and several missiles landed in the sea outside of there. So you can imagine being a heart patient in those buildings and you're hearing these explosions in the water outside while you're being cared for, and not very comforting. So the administration realized that we are going to need to do something more serious. There had been plans for, I believe, a 1 or a 150 bed facility, and they asked permission from the government to increase it to 500 beds. The government said, if you're going to already do this, we want you to do 2,000 beds because nobody else in this region has that. And then the hospitals in Haifa and the surrounding area will have to send their patients to you, whoever can't be sent home, and you will become the designated hospital for the region in a time of war.
During peacetime, what is this underground hospital used as then?
It's used as an underground parking lot because there's, as you can see when you came here, parking is very hard to find in the area. So it becomes a parking facility, paid parking for patients and for the employees. It converts within 72 hours of notification from the government for us to prepare for a war situation into a totally fortified against conventional and unconventional warfare hospital. It's not like a bunker, it's truly a hospital. Hospital beds, 4 surgical suites, dialysis units, labor and delivery. A new command center has just been opened for the administration to be underground so that they can manage the entire environment. That cost more than $1 million and was funded primarily by Christians from around the world. There's even a nursery, daycare center so that employees can bring their children here and their children can be safe while they're working.
Okay. That's, you're thinking about everything.
We have to, because in a wartime situation, what happened during the Second Lebanon War, our doctors, our nurses, our staff, and our patients were all in danger. And you cannot give good medical care when you've got missiles falling over your head and you have sirens going off all the time. And the general feeling was that what happened during the Second Lebanon War was bad, but that whatever's going to happen next, because of the unrest in the region and everything that's been happening around us, it's going to be a lot worse. Mm-hmm. And so they made every effort to be as prepared as possible.
Is it already, I mean, it's functional as it is.
Yes.
But you still need some more equipment to go there.
We need a lot. I just recently learned that, we have all of these built-in units in the walls for connecting all of the essential, like gases, oxygen, electric, everything like that you need for taking care of a patient. These are in the walls and in the ceiling. But in order to connect from the ceiling to a bed, we need a special portable stand-up unit. We're still lacking 600 of those units. And without those units, that's 600 patients we cannot care for. Mm-hmm. We have the capacity for 2,000 patients, but we can only take care of 1,400. And you have to keep in mind that we're talking about serving a population of up to 2.5 million people. We have to be able to take in all of the wounded and anyone who is so sick that they cannot be sent home. We also have to be able to receive patients that are, for example, outpatients that are coming in for a dialysis treatment and then are leaving during a time of relative peace in between sirens. There's also a lot of money needed to pay for linear accelerators that are being installed on the bottom level so that cancer treatments can continue even in a time of war, because cancer doesn't stop just because missiles are falling around you.
Yeah, I see. Beside of the population here in the north that you serve, we have heard reports about people from Syria coming to Israel for their medical treatment.
Yes. What happens there is, as I mentioned earlier, Rambam is the only level 1 trauma facility in the north of Israel. So there are aid organizations located within Syria that their job is to help Syrians wounded in the what's going on there. So patients are brought to them, and some of these are secular organizations, some of these are Christian organizations, but what happens is somebody's sick and needs care that is beyond what they can give, either as first aid or whatever. So then they escort them to the border. The soldiers then are able to investigate the situation because they've come through a screened process, and people who are the most critically ill are sent to Rambam. A lot of the patients are sent to Nahariya, to Tzfat, but if they are in critical condition, they are brought to Rambam. A couple of examples, I believe it was a couple years ago now, there was an elderly woman who was literally shot in the heart. She was still alive. They brought her here to Rambam, and we have a world-famous cardiovascular surgical team, multidisciplinary, and they were able to remove, they found a piece of shrapnel about this big in her heart. They were able to remove it, stitch her up, and she was able to get better, and they were able to send her back, home.
I see.
We had another patient, he was injured in the fighting, and his jaw was literally blown off. We had just had a 3D printer installed, and the doctors took the proper measurements to check him, and they printed a 3D jaw for him and rebuilt his whole face. It was the first such procedure to have been performed here in Israel. He was able to come back from Syria for follow-up treatment. Unfortunately, he was wounded again in the fighting, and we were also able to treat him for that. We've had children who were wounded in the war brought to us. We had one child who was wounded and they discovered she had cancer. She actually stayed here for several months with her mother, and then she was sent home. And I think for us, the hardest part is we cannot offer them refuge. Once they're better, we have to send them back. And our hope and prayer is that they will be okay and that they will be safe, but we can't guarantee it.
But these patients, they know that they've been treated by Israelis.
Oh yeah, we had one family that came. The father said, I was taught my whole life that Israel was our enemy. But now I know that my own people are my enemy. And it was a very poignant moment when he shared that.
So what about, you said you're concerned because you cannot offer them refuge. So when they return to Syria, what will happen to them?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay. So, but can they openly tell that they've been in Israel for treatment, or is it?
No, we have to keep that secret.
Okay. So
And that is everything is done very, very carefully to do everything we can to protect their identities. When we take pictures of the people, their faces are completely blurred. We make them unidentifiable. When the children were here, we took pictures only from the back. Things like that. We do everything we can to protect their identity, because if someone finds out that they were here for a period of time and had medical care here and got a good benefit from it, there are people who would try to kill them. To the best of our knowledge, that has not happened. And we have received letters smuggled in from Syria to Israel from some of the patients, or telephone messages saying that they're doing okay and thanking us for their care.
That's wonderful news then to receive.
It is.
When we look at the research that is done here at Rambam, what would you say is the most significant breakthrough or area that you actually are working on?
Wow. We're working on so many different areas. There's a specific medical device that was created for using in the heart. It had not worked, and the company came up with a new idea for how to make it work. It was for a unique type of heart failure. So that device was installed here at Rambam, and we were looking for possible patients to treat with it, and someone in Canada heard about it. And everyone was afraid of being treated because it involved putting like a little mesh thing in one of your ventricles and then holding it open. And nobody had done it before. Nobody knew if it was going to work. And the patient said, listen, I'm going to die if I don't get this treatment. So if I die after getting the treatment, nothing's changed. I want the treatment. And he was willing to take that risk. He flew here, and the last news we received is he's doing very well in Canada now. And that has provided a huge breakthrough for us to be able to work together with that company to see this device developed. And the potential for saving lives is huge. We have a lot of collaborations with many high-tech medical companies. For example, Given Imaging developed the pill cam, which is a pill you swallow for diagnostic purposes. And it is a pill you swallow for diagnostic purposes, and that has now been very commonly used throughout the world, and that is something that we worked with the developers. There's a cardiac mapping system called the CARTO system, produced by Biosense Webster, a Johnson & Johnson company. It's the gold standard today for treating atrial fibrillation through cardiac catheterization. They helped develop that here. So it's hard to put your finger on what. The first in vitro fertilization in our region was performed here. And today our obstetrics and gynecology department has a very strong IVF department. We have excellent genetic researchers, and there's been a lot of discoveries into types of problems that it was unknown previously that they were related to the genes. And now that we know what the genetic problem is, there have been some cases where we were actually able to work with families to help them have their child without that genetic flaw. That's huge.
Yeah. It's wonderful to hear all the breakthroughs that you have accomplished here at Rambam. As representing a Christian group, a Christian TV channel in Norway, what do you say that the Christians could do to support you?
Okay, I'm never going to undermine or underestimate the power of prayer. First and foremost, if God doesn't build the house, we labor in vain. And this is not a Christian hospital. I want to stress this. This is not a Christian hospital, but as Christians, we are called to pray for Israel. We are called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But people don't stop to think of what that means. Think about saving lives so that people can have more time to find out who their God is on a very basic level. But beyond that, pray for the people. There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of sickness and disease, just like in any other country. Our doctors need wisdom. We need money. I'm not going to underestimate that. But we can't generate that out of thin air. But you can pray. If you don't have the resources to donate, then pray. Pray for God to touch someone's heart who will give. But if you have the resources to give, you know, many people say, well, I want to give to Israel, and they give for emotional reasons. So they'll give food and they'll give clothing, which is here today and gone tomorrow. But when you've given to a place like Rambam Healthcare Campus, when you've donated funds, for example, to the cardiovascular hospital that we don't have enough money to finish yet, you've invested in a permanent donation to save people's lives. Not only to give them the best of quality heart care, but to ensure that the bottom floors of that hospital are fortified as well against chemical and conventional warfare, so that a heart patient who can be very quickly destabilized just by moving him won't have to be moved. When you donate to a hospital like this, you are in effect having a huge impact on the people of Israel, on the Jewish people, on the lives of people here, and on future generations. And to me, that is a donation well worth giving, because you know you've made a change. You know you've made a difference, and you know it's permanent.
I say amen to that. Our time has come to its end. So I would thank you for taking your time here to speak with us. And for dere seere så vil jeg bare si tusen takk for at dere har fulgt oss gjennom dette programmet. Og på gjensyn igjen neste uke.
Thank you.
Thank you.